Traditional storytelling methodology would probably suggest for me to start with an emotional hook to grab your attention. But the reason I want to support Fish Welfare Initiative in this year's Project for Awesome kind of goes against that. I think it's important that we put our initial emotional response to the side for a second in order to truly grasp the issue that is fish welfare. So let's start with some facts. You might already know that most of the animals that are used and killed are used and killed on farms. This goes directly against the fact that most of the money that's donated in order to help animals go to animal shelters. One of the reasons for this is probably that we have a much easier time to relate to dogs and cats. We interact with them and thereby recognize them as individuals with their own personalities, with likes and dislikes. At the same time, within farmed animals, most farmed animals are farmed fishes. This is not super helpful because we probably also have a much easier time to relate to a cow or a pig because we can hear their screams, and when we see into their faces, we can kind of interpret what they are feeling, so we can relate to their suffering. The same is not true for farmed fishes. We can't really interpret anything into their faces most of the time, but this is kind of an us problem, right? Our difficulties to emotionally relate to their suffering doesn't make their suffering go away. It only makes us more ignorant of it. I think this is best demonstrated by reframing the entire situation a little bit. If you used to watch or still watch SpongeBob, you might remember this episode where these hooks are terrorizing Bikini Bottom. And while watching this episode, I assume you were not rooting for the fishes to be caught. Part of the reason for that, I think, is because within SpongeBob we can see these marine animals as individuals with their personalities, with their likes and dislikes, with the complexity of their lives. And while, of course, this animated series is quite anthropomorphic, science does suggest that fishes have far more complex inner lives than we think. Firstly, it's already misleading to speak of fishes as a group in the same context as we speak of a dog and a cat, or a cow and a pig. And you probably didn't notice until I mentioned it now. There are roughly 20,000 different species of fish, so putting them all together is very indicative of how we have troubles recognizing them as individuals. It also seems that some wild fishes have quite exceptional memories. They can remember being caught for up to 11 months. Fishes are a social species. They solve problems involving complex coordination. Some fishes like to play games, and some like to be petted by humans. And fishes have been shown to pass down cultural knowledge through generations. All of this is quite impressive stuff, and all of this might be surprising because, as mentioned before, we don't really emotionally relate to them as much. Fish Welfare Initiative does all the work that we don't really want to think of. That's why Animal Charity Evaluators, an organization that evaluates animal charities, considers them one of the top charities, because most farmed animals are farmed fishes, but barely anyone works on them. At the same time, most animals live in Southeast Asia, but most of the money to help animals comes from and therefore goes to Northern America and Western Europe. Fish Welfare Initiative takes these two very, very neglected areas, that is marine animals in Southeast Asia, and puts them together, thereby overcoming any sort of bias that we might have to help those that are close to us or help those that we can relate to more, and instead purely focusing on the actual fact of the matter. That is, there's a huge amount of fishes suffering, and there's very little done to help them.